All right, welcome to another episode of Tea Time at PhysioX. Today we have Chris, bro, I can never say your last name, Matagrano.
There you go.
Okay, I've been saying it right this whole time. So Chris Matagrano, personal trainer, and in my opinion, one of the most knowledgeable people I have in the field. We work very closely together from a trainer to therapy relationship, as well as he also program for some of our clients at PhysioX as well. And pleasure to have you here today.
A pleasure to be here. So
Absolutely. All right, so let's start off with the obvious. How tall are you, bro?
6'8". So I used to lie when I played basketball though. I would tell them I was 6'9", just because like I was trying to sell myself a little bit more, especially like so I played overseas, and so
Yeah.
it's like the difference between 6'8" and 6'9" over there. They'd be like,
Oh, it's like 5'9" and 5'10"
Yeah, exactly.
for normal people.
exactly.
Okay.
It's like when somebody's trying to date somebody and it's like, I'm 6 foot. It's like, no, you're not. You're 5.
Okay.
You're
All
5'11".
right.
It's like the same
So
thing.
that's a cutoff for like big man.
Yeah,
6'8",
exactly. Like I was 6'9",
6'9".
and so that's what I always tell people.
All right. Cool.
But I think realistically, I'm 6'8". So
All right. Well, tell me about this. Well, you're your closest person I know to play pro ball. Cause you played overseas? How long were you playing?
I played for 5 years. I was in Denmark, Slovakia, Portugal, Spain, and Colombia.
Yeah.
So it was a good time, but it was definitely. It sounds better than it actually was.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I thought playing pro ball is kind of the shit, man. It's like
it was
hoop
the dream.
dreams. Hoop
Yeah,
dreams.
exactly.
Yeah.
It was the dream, but like there were some places I was that were better than others. Like where I was at in Slovakia, like we had on paper it was like a 4-star hotel. We had access to like the pool, hot tub, massages once a week, and so. But then when you actually think about it, it's like, oh, we live in a hotel, so I don't have a kitchen. All right, and then we found out like that the guy giving the massages was our general manager who had no idea how to give massages. So we'd just be sitting there like once a week, you're just getting the crap beat out of you by this random guy. And I'm like, so.
When do you find that out? Like a month later?
No, my first time when he started punching my back, I'm like, something's not right here. And so, like then we won our first couple games, and then we started losing, and then they like stopped feeding us as much. And so I'm like, I don't have a kitchen.
Wait, what do you mean they stopped feeding you? Like,
Well, I lived in a hotel, so they were in charge of like what we ate. We started losing, so they stopped giving us as much food. Like I have like a little scoop like this of rice and like a piece of chicken. We had 2 practices a day. I'm like, I'm dying. I lost 30 pounds in 3 months. It was crazy.
they could do that?
Well, they did.
That is
And so
crazy.
at that point in time, I was eating like super clean and so I wasn't like my other teammates would go and like buy like cakes and stuff. Like that's how like they maintained all their size. And like I was just like, no, like I'm eat like these apples or like just whatever I could. And then I like just like screw it. And then so eventually I left there. I had some visa issues, so I left. And then I went to Spain afterwards, and I was like 30 pounds less. I played the rest of my season in Spain, and then I went back to the same team in Spain the following year, except I was like 30 pounds heavier because I put back on all my size. They're like, what happened to you? You're a different person. So, but yeah, so there were some positives and negatives. But
Yeah.
the coolest part though was like getting to like see these other cultures. Like you've been places, like you've traveled, but you can go someplace for 2 to 3 weeks, but when you actually go there and you're there for like 9 months, like you're actually part of these people's lives in like these other countries. And so to me, that was like one of the coolest parts about it.
Yeah. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about being so immersed in this other culture. Like, what do you gain from that?
So I feel like, depending on where I was, but like some of the places, like you almost got accepted like into like part of their family. Like one of the places in Spain, we would eat there on the weekends. So we had this like in the 2 places I played in Spain, we would always eat in restaurants. And so like that's what they would pay for. And one of the restaurants was on the weekend, and like they had like a little kid or 2 little kids, and like they'd come running up to us like every weekend, and like they'd show us like their new toys that they got to play with. And it was just like, I didn't understand the word they were saying because I never spoke any of the languages anywhere I went, but this little kid all excited sitting there showing us his toys. And so it was cool to be able to be part of families like in other places and see how people can be like so accepting of you when you've like they didn't know me, like they didn't have to, all they were doing was cooking food for me, like they didn't have to like accept me in the way they did. So stuff like that was cool. And then I think it also translates well to like what I do now. Like I grew up in a blue collar town where everybody was like worked hard, but it was always just people who did similar jobs, or especially like in my eyes as like an 18-year-old. And then when I went overseas, it's like you start to see how you relate to somebody in this other country, and like how you learn how to work with these people, whether you don't know how to speak the same language as them, or like just coming from different walks of life and different priorities. So I think that's the things I got out of it the most.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I realized from just like traveling and seeing different cultures is that everyone is pretty much the same. We're all human. You don't have to understand the language to know when someone's upset. You don't need to know the language to know when someone is feeling anxious or frustrated, or when they're happy to see you. It's just there's this energy that you can just kind of pick up.
Of
I think
course.
that's super powerful.
Yeah,
Now,
definitely.
okay, so now you got your whole pro journey now. Now you stepped out of there, and then you started as a personal trainer, or when did that take place?
So yeah, once I was done playing overseas, I had an idea like my last year of what I wanted to do.
Right.
And so like I started like looking into like the NASM certification, and I thought once I was done with overseas, I was like, oh, like I took my certification, passed it. I was like, this is going to be an easy job, like so
Right.
simple. And then I started to realize, like my first day, with my Andrew, who said to me, he's like, what are the 4 muscles of the rotator cuff? And like just put me on the spot, and I was just like, and just froze for a second.
Right,
And
right.
then he just looked at me, he's like, what are you still doing here? Like, go find out. And I was like, right off the bat, I was like, all right, I need to know more. Like, there's more out there that I have no idea, and things are going to be really relevant to these people that I'm working with. So I thought right after basketball, I was like, oh, like I've seen so much. Like I've had all these different types of coaches, and they all, some good, some really bad. They all sort of guided me on this way of, it's like, I'll be fine. I can just pass this all along to like my clients. And then it's like, I know nothing. I need to learn more. So
Yeah, so after that, you just get hit with that, with that drill, so you kind of change your life.
yeah,
You
exactly.
say, all
Like,
right.
I tell them all the time, like that was like one of the biggest things that changed like my trajectory as a trainer. I was like getting called out like day one, like right off the bat. It was like, hey, like you don't know as much as you think you do, and it's like that's okay because you can go find it. And it's like as long as you know how to find it and you're hungry to find it, like you'll be fine.
Yeah.
So
I think that probably is one of the most powerful thing for me as well, coming out of school, is just knowing that there's so much that you don't know.
yeah,
And I think the journey to get to that point, I think everyone needs to make that journey, make that trek. Because once you feel like you know everything, that's when you start growing.
well, I've always wondered this about you because like you obviously have a little bit of a different philosophy when it comes to like physical therapy than like probably where you started and what's necessarily taught right off the bat in school. Like, how did you get to that? Like what steps were there? Was there that sort of brought you down that path?
Just failing,
Okay.
just trying everything that I thought was going to work, and having it not work, and having it go completely in the opposite direction, questioning the things that I learned in school and the textbooks, and going like, I follow everything to the key. Why isn't this person getting better? So that makes you do a little more research on your own, and gets you to understand things a little bit further. And the further I dive, the further I realize that there is the nervous system that controls how your body positions itself in space, and then there's the joints where the muscles connect to, and then there's connective tissues and all of that. And and the further I dive deep into the subject, I realize there are hierarchies of what controls what first. And it seems that the nervous system has been kind of forgotten in a lot of the things that we teach in school. We think about muscles and we think about the joints, but if this is not really working well, everything else is not going to work well. Yeah, I think same as you, just not like being called out directly, but being called out by patients in the past saying, look, I don't feel better. And for me, it's like a huge imposter syndrome, right? Because I'm like, well, you should, because
Follow what the textbook said.
yeah, but if only it was that simple.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it just brought me into this journey and just learning to understand humans. That was big. Like you can't treat someone based on injury, and I'm sure you kind of know that.
Yeah.
For training, you can't just train everyone the same way. If you try that, you're gonna fail
Yeah, exactly.
miserably to
It's
the
like-
point where you want to just quit. It's just not worth it anymore.
You know, it's sort of where my philosophy has sort of moved to, like, you know, talking about like each person's like individual. Like, I feel like each person, the way I look at it is each person who comes in that works with me, or just each person in general, is looking for this answer. And it's like, so you have to try to come up with this equation that can get them to the answer. It's like if somebody's goal is to lose 10 pounds, it's like, okay, easy, couple nutritional changes, like easy equation, 5 + 5 = 10. Like, obviously, like you do the math in terms of calories and things like that, but easy equation, simple answer. But then real life starts to hit, and you have this person, it's like they've got 3 kids, their significant other travels for work all the time. Now they can only get to the gym once a week. They've never really lifted hard. They don't have time to cook for themselves, so they have to constantly eat out. And it's like, okay, their equation just became infinitely more complex, and there's still a bunch of equations that can get them to their like end goal, but what I always try to do is like, all right, what's the easiest equation to get them there? And it's like, there's a bunch of trial and error with that one too. It's like sometimes you come across that and it's like, oh, we just failed miserably with that one. It's like, we thought this was going to be the thing that was going to set you over the top, and it didn't. So
Hey, that's the exact same for rehab.
yeah,
You know, there's a whole spectrum from personal training to rehab. We're doing the same thing, and I think the way that we get from A to B is very similar to the way we think about it. It's just when we oversimplify things where we run into some trouble. But so I've seen a lot of your clients. You refer a lot of clients to PhysioX. Adrian and I, we've seen a lot of your clients now. One thing that everyone say just how much they love you. Like, why do people love you so much, man? Like, what's the deal?
so I think that one of the things that most of my people, or one of the reasons a lot of my clients like me, is just I genuinely want the best for them. Like, I try to, everything that I'm trying to learn, like one of the reasons I put such a emphasis on like my own education is so I can help them get to like their next step and like what they're looking for. Like, and I have my own, it's like I want to do it to help myself as well with like my own workouts and my own goals, but it's like primarily I do it because I want to figure out what's the best way to get them to their like solution. Like, how can I figure out their best equation? And it's like I genuinely put them first. It's like each of my clients, like I try to give that same attention to, and I think that's why most of them really like me. And hopefully it's also part of the fact that like I can understand where they're coming from, and it's like I've seen like different cultures, and like I've seen different walks of life. Like we were talking about like when I was overseas, and it's like, all right, I can relate to you even though you're in charge of something I have no idea about, or it's like, but we can still find common ground. So sort of like you said, reading people. And it's like I can sort of read or not that I'm great at reading their emotions, but it's like I can match that. So
At the end of the day, if you recognize there's a person in front of you and not like a weight loss person or like a pecs person, you know what I mean? Once you can make that connection, I think things are gonna flow a lot easier. Yeah. So
yeah, if you want bigger chest, it's like, oh, it's really simple, but it's like, but then when you weigh everything else, it's actually really hard. It's like, okay, you're gonna need to eat more, and you've never eaten more. It's like, okay, you're gonna need to be able to come into the gym this many days, or be able to get this many sets, or push this close to failure. And it's like, those things become much more complex, but it's like learning how to work with somebody and constantly move the chain closer in that direction. So.
Absolutely, man. So let's get a little nerdy right now. and I want to talk about what are you learning now? Like what's kind of like piquing your interest in the moment in the whole realm of personal training?
So I went through the N1 certification, and so I did their biomechanics course, and then they had a programming course, which got really complex, and I want to re-go through. And then they had a nutrition course that sort of loops in with like their style of programming. And so I'm going in December to Colorado for, he has like a subsection of that based on like fat loss clients. And so how can, I forget if it was fat loss or like recomposition clients, but sort of going into like what's happening on like the cellular level for like when you program something. So for example, if you're trying to focus on something like an AMPK phase, which you would do for somebody who's trying to get more energy into the cell. And so you might load an exercise in the shortened position of, so it's like in its contracted position and it's loaded most there. So now all of a sudden your liver starts sending energy to that cell. And it's like, okay, that's good. And then you're gonna also focus on like shorter rest periods. And it's like, in all these different strategies to like teach your body to send energy there. And it's like, there are a couple different strategies that he's gonna go over. And so right now I'm like trying to go back through the course because it gets really complex. And it's like, hopefully I'm buying into like the right thing. The guy seems to know.
Yeah. No, he seems knowledgeable.
Yeah.
If something looks quacky, I'll let you know. I'm like, Chris, maybe not spend your money and time on this thing.
The money's already spent.
Not the
Maybe
time
don't
yet,
spend
right?
as much time. But
But yeah, talk me through like the first thing you said about the shortened position. What are you talking about? Give me like a example so our listeners and the viewers can understand.
yeah, so I actually think about in all of my programming, whether it be for a composition client or somebody looking for like orthopedic health, just taking the muscle to its full range of motion. So the way muscles work is they fully lengthen. So, which is the eccentric. I don't know if everyone knows what that is, but sort of the lowering process where you're resisting gravity is going to be as the muscle's lengthening. And so,
Kind of like, like when I'm...
so if you're doing a bicep curl,
Yep.
the way down, the muscle starts lengthening.
Yep.
And so we can do things where you can shorten that muscle based on like where that arm is in space. For example, if we bring our arm up here and we come into this position, this will be more of like the short heads or the long head's shortest position. And so then we can bring it behind us. That'll be the long head's more lengthened position. So,
Right. So what you're saying, there's a difference between doing a bicep here versus here versus
yes.
here. Okay, and
so-
you're manipulating that to create more effects for fat loss? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, potentially. So for example, also when you're doing something in the shortened position, there's going to be less muscular damage. So that person can come back in tomorrow and be like, hey, I feel really good. They burned a bunch of calories and now all of a sudden they're not sore. And it's like, I can do that again. And so when you're working with somebody who's a fat loss client, it's like, okay, how do I work you metabolically? How do I get you to do more and be able to do more again tomorrow and be able to do more again the next day?
What you're saying is, now I want you to kind of address all the listeners here because I think there's a big misconception that you have to come out of a workout feeling like shit in order for you to make progress.
Yeah.
Because that's what I used to believe in too.
course.
It's like
Well,
I go in the
right?
gym and I'm like, yo, I want to get crushed, right?
Yeah.
And the next day I couldn't walk, but I'm like, yo, that was good.
It's
Right?
like,
But what you're saying is, that's not true.
No, definitely not.
Well, yeah. Tell everyone, because I'm sure you can explain it much better than I can, because I'm out of the training field for a bit now.
Yeah. So, one, if you're somebody who's a fat loss client, right? Just because we were already talking about that, the more you move, the more calories you're probably going to burn.
Yep.
So you sitting there loading something in the shortened position, realistically, you're probably not going to be super sore, but you may have gotten enough of the stimulus that we were trying to achieve to be able to say, hey, that workout was perfect. We burned enough calories, or we worked on the things that we needed to work on. We got stronger in the things we needed to get stronger in. Come back tomorrow, and we're going to rinse and repeat. And it can be a different workout where we work different things, but you don't necessarily need to be sore, especially in terms of that. Now, for somebody who is trying to gain muscle, they may be, the thought right now is that most exercises, when trying to build muscle, you want to load things in the lengthened position. So if you were working a bicep curl, being down in this position, or a better example is a squat. You're trying to grow your quads. The bottom of a squat is where that quad is most lengthened. So that's probably going to be a good position to grow. So you may be a little bit sore, especially in the first couple times when you're doing these new novel movements, but eventually you should sort of get used to it. And there's times where you will be sore, but you don't need to be sore every single workout. And sort of knowing when you're sort of ramping it up, and it's like, all right, I'm going to be sore after this workout because I needed more volume to be able to achieve what I wanted, whether that be because you were stalling in terms of progress, or it was just something that was planned in your programming for the last week of your phase, or before you're going into a deload, things like that.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I'm learning stuff right now as we're talking. So, so let me see if I can explain what you just said with an example. So, of course, in a deep level of the squat, you're putting a lot of muscles in a more lengthened position, and that can facilitate more growth of that muscle.
yeah,
Now, if you train that same muscle in a more shortened position, you won't be able to gain as much muscle, but you can still burn a lot of calories doing that.
yeah.
So
you're still loading the muscle. You can still see some strength benefits, but in general, you're probably going to see less like muscle damage, so less soreness.
okay. So like say, for example, someone wants to lose weight, so would they be better off doing like a quarter squat?
So where a quarter squat, the weight's not loaded in the shortened position. So if we were to do a squat, you can stand there almost all day, and nothing's ever really happening. So for quads, one of the only exercises that really loads something in the shortened position would be something like a leg extension. So you can do quarter squats, but at the end of the day, based on like physics, so I don't know, like if you're thinking about moment arms, so a moment arm is the furthest as the load gets further away from like the joint.
Yeah.
That's when things will become heavier. So if you're thinking about a squat, you're standing straight up, you're vertical. So now all of a sudden, as your knees start to shift forward and move away from your the center of gravity, the quads start to take on more of a load. So using a leg extension would be a better example than a quarter squat.
Okay, I got it. So someone who wants to really gain a lot of size, full squats can be great, but someone who's trying to get some weight loss, maybe they're better off doing a lot of leg extensions, so they're not going to be as sore the next day. Would that
Potentially.
be?
Now, when you're doing a squat, somebody else may also, if you're just trying to get them to burn more calories,
All right.
doing a full squat, they may sit there and they may burn more because it's more of a compound movement. There's more going on. They're getting some more glutes. They're getting some adductors. So there's more happening, but it's just sort of realizing that you could do something else. Like there's the option. Maybe you do some squats, but then you follow it up, but you don't go to failure necessarily on those, but then you maybe go to failure on the leg extensions because that's the more shortened position. So you beat yourself up on the leg extensions, and then like hopefully you're not going to be less sore. Once again, first couple times doing it, maybe a little bit just because like it's a new movement to you, but in general, you're probably going to be less sore.
Oh, that's so interesting. So that's how you can give someone like a 5-day workout plan, have them lose weight and not have them overwork themselves, and have them be able to sustain that over time because they're not just feeling like crap.
Yeah, it's
5 days a week.
It was something that like I never sort of realized until like I started to understand like the physics and like the biomechanics of exercises, and it's like I started playing around with it and like some of the failures, and it's like I used to have people before I realized it. It's like, all right, you want to go 5 days a week, and it's like they're just toast after like day 3. It's like, all right, we squatted, and you know, if you're working with somebody who's really advanced, they may be able to handle that. But it's like, I work with a lot of people who are coming to the gym for the first time, and it's like, all right, I'm ready to go. Like, let's get it done. Like, I've never lifted before, but like, I'm finally ready to make this change. And it's like, you give them squats and then a leg press, and then they're like, all right, I can't walk for 3 days. And it's like, well, there goes our 5 days out the window. And it's like, maybe that works well for somebody who's advanced, but for that person who's never lifted, it's like, all right, if I just have you squat and then like we get some leg extensions, you'll be absolutely fine.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And another thing, last time I talked to you, you were using a lot of machines, and I think there was a shift, I don't know when it happened, where everyone loved machines, and then they're like, your machines suck, and we're gonna do just functional training, just like free weights. And then I see you, and you're back on the machines. Now I've been around long enough that I'm never gonna just say no completely to something.
Yeah.
So I love that you're doing that. But tell me what got you back into machines, because I know at the time that you were doing it, I think you were kind of like with the first trainer in the gym to go back to using machines for their clients, where everyone else is just backing away.
Yeah, there's a couple of us who have sort of moved back in that direction. But I'm a big fan of this idea of added stability. Like Pat Davidson uses the term ground. I just like using the term like you're having like an external stability. So our bodies like to cheat. Like we're constantly trying to find like what's the easiest way for me to do this. And like I don't want to do that, or like I have to compensate because that's really hard. And so when you start using some of these machines, and like if you set them up in like particular ways, you're not letting yourself cheat. For example, there's a hammer strength like plate loaded row, which I showed you, and it's just a machine that you can typically is used where you just grab the handles, you sit down, and then you start pulling. And as I was showing Jay, you can put a handle on it around the top and use the pad as a armrest to sort of lock you into place. So the only thing happening is what's happening throughout your arm. And then, so
I got you. So you pretty much what you're doing is with the machine is finding a way to free certain body parts, so the muscle that you're targeting is the only one that really should be doing the majority of the work.
exactly.
So you'll be very targeted for exactly what you're looking for.
100%. And so if somebody comes in, they say, hey, like we were talking about, like the pec guy, it's like, I want to grow my chest. It's like, okay, well, most people when they come in, they want to sit there and do like a barbell press. It's like a barbell press is going to grow their chest, obviously, but people may start cheating and like their elbows start to flare and they're getting more of their front delts. It's like, okay, then we can switch it to a dumbbell, and it's like, okay, they had like 6 good reps, and then all of a sudden 7 and 8 they start to flare, and it's like, okay, those are great, but now maybe we can move you to once you failed at that, we can move you to like a plate load press where you have no option, but your arms are sort of in that same line.
Right.
So
You know, that's very similar to what we do in rehab here. We say we want to give muscles no choice but to contract. Like everyone have trouble using their glutes.
yeah,
Well, we need to put all the joints in a position in which this is the only muscle that can work because we're putting that joint there. It's kind of like if I give you a weight here and I have you hold on to it and I say don't use your bicep, it's going to be impossible.
Yeah.
Because this bicep has to work when you pull it down all the way here. Now we can manipulate this position for any muscle part that we want, for any joint that we want. I think one of the differences is that we do it in a free flowing space, like something that resembles more like real life.
yeah,
Versus in the gym environment, you can use machines to really focus on just the training adaptation of that.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, one of the things that I've also realized or started to work with in terms of like that lengthening and shortening, or seeing muscles in the lengthen and shorten position is also, I've seen a lot of my clients have like better orthopedic health, like just sort of them seeing like that full range of motion, the muscle being loaded in that full range of motion. It's like now all of a sudden like things tend to just, people have less soreness or they wake up less stiff. Like I had a client who he's absolutely been crushing it, and he's down like 40 pounds. But he came in one day and he was like, yeah, like I wake up and I'm just stiff, like my hips are stiff, and I'm like, he's like, it's just the way I'm gonna live the rest of my life. I know it, and it's cool. I'm like, that's not the way. And so we started focusing a little bit more on like some hip flexion or hip flexor exercises in like both where it's loaded in a lengthened position and it's loaded in a shortened position. Then we started loading. I started doing some glute medius work with him, as well as like hip thrusts or single leg hip thrusts, and then like a drop lunge, which would really lengthen that glute. And it's like he saw the full range of motion. And I asked him a couple weeks ago, I'm like, how have your hips been feeling, by the way? He's like, he's like, I don't even notice them anymore. And it's like, cool, like all that stiffness and tightness that you were feeling, just needed to see like a full range of motion. And it's like, I didn't necessarily know what was the thing that was causing it. It's like, let's just go trial and error. Like, I didn't know the exact equation, but it's like, we'll find an equation that works. And it's like, we threw a bunch at him, and all of a sudden he's like, yeah, wake up fine.
Yeah.
So,
And I'll tell you this, in rehab, there's a lot of problems that can be fixed if you can bring a muscle through its full range of motion. I'm telling you, bring a joint through a full range of motion, under load, in a way that feels safe for the nervous system, magical things happen. People who felt stiff for years end up waking up and just notice things just gliding so much better. And I think that's part of the reason why we work so well together, because although we are in different professions, we share a very similar philosophy to how we work. So you program for a lot of my clients, and this is the feedback I get from everyone. Like, hey man, I don't think I've felt so much. The amount of gains I've had since working with Chris has been unbelievable, and they're not hurt.
yeah.
That's my favorite part.
They're
They're coming back to me. I'm just like, ah. So I love when we can just find our PS clients who's done working with us, and they're like, hey, look, I want to have a program that I can do in the gym that respects my body, and it's gonna actually make me feel good physically, and also help me build muscle or lose weight or whatever it is that I want to do at the same time. And I go, hey, look, my job is done.
Yeah.
Like, I gotten you back to running, whatever sports, like you're feeling good in your body, but you want to build muscle on top of this frame, or you want to lose weight, and do all these things. Chris is the guy you want to talk to. Like, he's the person that can take you to that other level. And then when you have someone that gets hurt and you're just kind of scratching your head, it's like, oh my God, what am I gonna do with this person? And you send them over to me, and I get them fixed up and I send them back to you. I love that cycle that we have. And for me, I think it makes the job so much easier when there's this level of communication that we have between like a trainer and a physical therapist. Like, what has been your experience just kind of having that congruency?
Yeah, so it always seems so seamless. Like, if I ever send somebody to you, it's like, hey, Chris, these are the things that this person needs to work on. And it's like, sometimes you'll tell me like exactly what you want me to do with them, but also too, you'll tell me, and it's like giving me a little bit of autonomy to be like, hey, like within your own like philosophy and your own, like you said, we have similar philosophies, but like within your own sort of thing, work on this. This person needs like to work on their hip flexors, and it's like, okay, like let's play around with some of like my exercises that it's like you're going to do, like they're supposed to keep doing the things that you're supposed to do, or they're supposed to do with you, and then they come in with me, and it's like, all right, we're going to try to find a way how we work this in to also find a way to hit your goals. It's like your goal, like one of the things I've noticed is when I send people to you and they start working with you and then they keep working with me, their goals don't necessarily get put on pause. It's like if somebody's goal is to lose weight, it's like, okay, we don't have to wait 8 weeks for you to run through physical therapy, for you to say, hey, like, we're good to go now. Like, it's just sort of like they go to you, hey, Chris, they're going to be doing this, this, this. You should try playing around with a couple of these things, and then just have at it with the rest of it. It's like, cool. And then people just keep moving towards their goals versus like this big pause that like I would see sometimes if I send somebody to another physical therapist who has less communication or who is a little bit more conservative, let's say, and it's like, hey, like you have you have some rotator cuff issues. Here's a band. Let's get external rotations and like let's avoid any upper body movements for the next like 6 to 8 weeks. It's like, all right, well, that doesn't help you get a bigger chest that you wanted. So let's like we're going 8 weeks in reverse. So that would be like what I would say like is the best part, or like the like my experience working with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I mean, for me, I don't have that same trust for all the trainers. Like I can't just go to any trainer and be like, hey, this person's dealing with this back issue. I want them to lengthen their glutes, or I want them to lengthen this specific part of the muscle, and then just have at it. But I think for you, I can say those things to you, and I know you're gonna find a way that's gonna be safe, and you put that muscle through that range, and then the client usually have no complaints.
Yeah.
And they come back and how's it going? And it's like, yeah, great workout. And I was like, cool.
And that's it.
And then and every week I'm seeing changes. And matter of fact, I think we see changes at a faster rate when they are working with someone else at the same time versus just working with us. Because we'll see them once a week usually. We don't normally see people more frequent than that. And maybe some really bad cases, we'll have to see them a couple times a week. But we don't know what they're doing the rest of the 5-6 days they're not seeing us. We can put stuff in their program, and
who knows what they're doing?
Who knows what they're doing? And also, we even program some of their workouts, right? But having you with expertise to bring them through an even more refined plan, respecting what we do in rehab, I mean, I can't think of a better way to do it. Like if I was a client, I would definitely want that relationship.
Yeah, where you have both like working in unison. So
yeah.
I had a question for you though. You were talking earlier about that like the nervous system works really well when it's comfortable.
Yeah.
And you were saying like a lot of the stuff that you do is like based on like free motion things. And I was wondering if you think that part of like sort of where I told you like I've transitioned a little bit into like using more machines, that with that external stability, sometimes like you can load things in ways, but like with that external stability, would that be something that you would think that would also help somebody, it's like nervous system, be like, hey, I'm comfortable in this lengthened and shortened position. Like maybe that's one of the reasons that some of the clients I work with actually have noticed less like stiffness, or they notice like they're in less pain, or it just sort of, you mentioned that, I was like just sort of going back in my head, I was like, it's actually interesting.
Absolutely. I think it's just a framework that you wrap around the problem with, right? There's so many ways to make the nervous system feel safe. One of them is just making something work in a way it's supposed to, that you think is supposed to give you a lot of pain, and then in fact it doesn't. That's very reinforcing for the nervous system. So someone with a bum shoulder, and they go into a machine and you work these muscles surrounding the shoulder and they come out and they feel great, that does wonders for the nervous system. Or for us, it could be us having them put their hands in a certain way on a wall and kind of pushing back and feeling a little burn in these forearms or whatever muscles, and they come out and they feel great. That's something that makes their nervous system more comfortable. So there's so many different ways that you can go at it. And when the nervous system is more comfortable, the body changes. Like, you ever seen someone super anxious and they're walking around?
All day.
Yeah, all day, right?
Yeah.
That's everyone. Very stiff, right? You see someone on vacation and they're walking on the beach, dude, gliding. Yeah. Smooth gliding, right?
And then they come back, or they're on vacation, you talk to them and they're like, yeah, like I was in no pain throughout my entire vacation. And they come back and they're like, I'm miserable. Like it was definitely the plane. It's like,
yeah,
oh, was it the plane?
Yeah, is it the plane?
It's just the fact that you were just less stressed while you were like walking around on a beach in Hawaii. Like
that's huge. I mean, the whole mental side of it is huge, but taking it from a physical perspective is huge too. And I'm not really deciding which one comes first, because I think they come together. Because I've seen cases where someone's mentally very, I wouldn't say unstable, but they're very stressed in the nervous system. They're in a fight or flight response because of something that's happened to the body. But do we go straight to the mind and say, hey, I want you to like meditate and all that? Yes, everyone should. But what if we go physical and we go, well, let's just give you your muscle healthy movements that you think is dangerous and just literally prove to you objectively that you can do it and
Yeah.
not set yourself back. And what that does here goes back and changes what they feel in the body too. So there's this cycle that can happen, and it can start anywhere. Like, this is an example I give, that you go into a pool and the lifeguards say, hey man, the pool's really cold. And you're like, okay, so you're gonna go in there like nervous, and then you tip your toes in and you're like, damn, it's not even that cold. And then instantly your body just kind of like lets it go, right?
Yeah.
So if you mentally think something's gonna be really feel awful, and then you find a way to counteract that mentality, whether it's physical, whether it's just you be thinking yourself out of it, that can be very therapeutic.
I like that. I don't know exactly how, like, as a trainer, try not to work with, like, stay within your scope of practice, but it's like thinking about that for a couple of my clients who are like deal with whether it be stiffness or like just who are like always uptight, and it's like, how can that relate to them? And so I like that.
Yeah. I mean, the way you frame things, the language that you use can change the way you feel physically, mentally, and everything else. I have people do something and they'll go, yeah, it's probably gonna hurt tomorrow. I was like, why do you say that? And then when it does hurt, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It just reinforces feedback loop with the nervous system that every time I do this, it's gonna hurt. Every time I do this, it's gonna hurt. Versus some of the people, they go do this and it's like, maybe it'll hurt tomorrow, maybe not. And tomorrow they go and it's like, oh, I swear it's gonna hurt, and it doesn't hurt. We just start to break that loop.
Yeah.
That's really what we're doing. We're just breaking down loops and patterns that's kind of been a default in the nervous system. How do we create new pathways that's actually healthy for the person?
It's so crazy because that all makes so much sense, and it's so crazy that like physical therapy doesn't have more of that, or traditional physical therapy doesn't have more of that sort of integrated within it.
I can go into a tangent on that.
I'm sure you can.
But what I think is just, it's very hard to change standardized schooling. Like, they've been teaching this subject for such a long time, and the board exam's been testing on these subjects for such a long time. It's very hard to make a move on a giant ship, right? You got to steer real slow.
Yeah.
But when you break yourself out of that mold and be able to kind of think for yourself and learn things, you can take that ship anywhere. You learn some new things, so how does it fit into my paradigm? How do I fit it into what I already know? And if I learn some things and it doesn't fit at all, well, I'm like, was it worth it to integrate it? Because it'd be really hard to integrate things from two separate paths.
It also, I feel like, is something that's harder to, like when you're trying to teach people that, and it's like harder to necessarily see results on paper. And it's like when you're sitting there like reading a book about it, and it's like, I feel like that's a little bit harder to like convince somebody. And then like when you are in person and you actually sit there and you do it with somebody and they're like, it doesn't hurt doing this. It's like a complete game changer. But when you're reading about it, it's like almost seems like magic. It's like, okay, I'm supposed to believe that this thing that like I didn't really strengthen anything changed like the whole system. But I've watched it a million times with you, so I believe it as everyone else should. But I believe like on paper, it's got to be like a harder thing to convince somebody of, especially like going through like school. And I'm sure like all the other things that you learn in school are really important, like sort of molded you into how you got here. But
yeah, I mean, even practitioners that I speak with, clinicians that I speak with, they watch what we do and they don't really understand or don't think it really works until I explain it in a way that makes sense, and then they experience it in their own body, and it's like, okay, it actually works.
Yeah.
And there's this like magical moment in which what you learn and then apply it and it actually works, and you still can't believe it because you're like, I know it's supposed to, but that has not really been the case so far.
well, when Rocky was here, he had the wedge under my foot, or he had me do an overhead press, and my overhead presses always feel not great. And then he had me stand on a wedge in like with 1 foot forward in like a split stance, and it just went up like butter. And I was like, wait, what? I was
Yeah.
like, that's a thing, like just by placing this little ramp underneath my big toe, and all of a sudden like the rest of the chain just sort of shot up. Just
The foot is huge. That's why we focus on it so much. You change the shape of the foot, the femur changes, the tibia changes, the rib cage changes. Everything starts to change based on what's happening down here. And it just makes sense, right? You start with the foundation, and based on that, everything on top have to adjust just based on the way that you can kind of fight gravity.
yeah.
All right, I want to leave with this question here. It is, what kind of advice would you give to like young trainers starting out in this field and wanting to kind of become good at the craft?
Yeah, so most importantly, I think, is putting your clients, like we talked about why my clients really like me, like being very genuine and like really wanting to help your clients. Like if you're here, you know, the money is obviously one of the reasons like we all work, but if you get into it because you're trying to like really help somebody and like help people move along in their journeys, that a lot of these people have had these goals to lose 20 pounds for the last 20, 30 years. And it's like, you can be part of that. And that's the best part about being a trainer. So if you're in it for that reason, like, I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice, but also keep learning, because there's so much more that you don't know, and you owe it to the people that are paying you to at least be trying to figure out what the best thing is for them. So that would be my advice to them.
I think that's the same advice I give to the team. So I was gone for like close to a month in October, and I say, when I'm not here to make decisions, this is the decision framework that you want to make. Make the decision that is going to give the best experience for the client that you're seeing. Make a decision based on that, and even if, say, we lose some money because of that decision that we make, it doesn't matter, because that's why we even exist in the first place. And if we make decisions that's actively going against that, well, that's how things fail.
Yeah.
Because you start to, then you lose trust, and people look at you as, oh, they're just in it for the money, you know, whatever. But yes, we need to make some money for sure. We need to pay the bills, right?
That's how you have this place. It's how I have my house. It's I have that kid at home. It's like all those things require money. Yes,
Yeah.
but if you're not sitting there and like you're not putting like the people in, when you're sitting there for that hour where you're with that client, and if you're not with them and like 100% focused on them and have put the time and effort in before that session, it's like you're doing them a disservice, and then and at the end of the day, you're doing yourself a disservice, because you're not going to be as busy, you're not going to be as good at your job. So
Yeah, I think that's good advice for trainers. That's life advice, and that's even business advice. All right.
there you go.
Hey.
All three. You got all three without with only asking one question.
Exactly. Hey, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. If anyone is looking for Chris, where can people find you? I know you're not really active on Instagram. By the way, some of the best coaches out there are not active on social media. They just grind and do the work in silence, and you get their clients better. Chris is one of those people.
Yeah.
But where can people find you if they want to find you?
Through you.
Contact me.
Contact Jay. You can find me.
At some point, maybe you start like a social media page or something.
Yeah, I've talked about it for a while, and then and just never did. So I was trying to actually set one up while I was playing overseas, and I was like, I'm gonna get a bunch of sponsors, like make some extra cash, and I just never knew what to post. So
yeah, it's a hard game, man.
Yeah. It doesn't help that I would post something and my wife would be like, I don't know about that one. I'm like, all right. So I had her being like my social media like person.
That's your mistake. That's your mistake. Yeah, I don't run anything by Shirley. I think if she has an opinion on my stuff, I think I'll probably produce 1% of what I produce.
I would just embarrass her too much. So
yeah. Hey, it's part of your job, man, as a husband.
Yeah, seriously.
Cool. Find me to find Chris.
Yeah. Thank you.